Hi, biology class. Mr. Wagner here. Welcome back to Aves video part 2. We've left off at mating and fertilization in your notes. So please get your note packet out. Find mating and fertilization. It's where we left off last time with our notes. And we're going to jump right in. Mating often occurs after courtship. Male sperm passes from the testes to the cloaca of the female. In the most species, the left ovary and the oviduct is the only functioning pair. Egg cells are released by the ovary and go to the oviduct. So this is how baby birds are made. Albumin is added to the eggshell. Sperm migrates up the oviduct and fertilizes the egg as it descends into the cloaca. This can happen in minutes or it can take months. A shell is finally added at the end of the oviduct and the egg is then laid. So here's kind of what it looks like inside of the chicken. They have one opening toward the back, and that's basically the cloaca. You have both waste coming out of there, as well as that's the place where sperm goes up into the ovary. All right, let's talk a little bit about the egg. The yolk is the egg shell. The yolk is the egg cell, C-E-L-L. Germinal spot is the embryo on the yolk. The egg white is albumin that protects the yolk and it's an additional source of food. The eggshell is made of calcium and has tiny pores for air. Even though it doesn't look like it, the eggshell actually lets air in and out. And there's something called the chalaza that keeps the yolk upright when eggs are turned, so the embryo is always upright. Eggs are always constantly turned as a mom is sitting on them. Here's what we're looking at. This diagram will probably appear on the test, so you should know it. The shell at the top is the outer part. There's shell membranes. There's the germinal disc. There's the white, that's the albumin. The chalaza is this tiny little line that holds the stuff upright. There's the yolk, and then there's the vitelline membrane, or the yolk membrane, vitelline membrane goes from there. So make sure you know this one. This will be on the test. Here's the same picture, a little bit different. In fact, I think actually this is the picture that's on the test, if I'm not mistaken. You have the thin albumin, the thick albumin, the vitelline or yolk membrane. We have the inner shell membrane, the air sac. Air sac is just a tiny little spot of air inside of the cell. We have the outer shell membrane, the chalaza, again, that little thing that holds it upright. The yolk, the germinal disc, sometimes it's also called the blastodisc. And that's actually the fertilized egg right there. So this is actually the picture that will appear on the test. Make sure you know this. Here's what it looks like after the baby is developing. A tiny little chick. You're saying, well, it looks kind of more like a snake, right? So this is after 72 hours. You see how small it is. The spinal cord, the wing bud is developing, a little leg bud, a tail bud. The brain is developing, and the heart. All of those, and then the eye. My picture is covering the eye, so I will move that. That's going to be the eye. Now this is one side, this is a side view. Let's see what happens as it develops a little bit more, see if it makes a little more sense. There it is, so it develops a little bit more. There's my embryo in there. The egg, now you notice all that stuff is going into his stomach. That means it's eating all the nutrients and growing. Eye, there's the yolk sac, there's a leg, the tail, the albumin, the wing, all those things. Also be attention to this one. I'm not sure if this picture is on the test or not. I do not remember, but you're going to know it either way. That way you'll be all set. Let's talk a little bit about nesting. Eggs are laid in already prepared nests. Some nests are simple and some are complex. Nest building is an instinct. An instinct means you do not need to teach this. It's just something all creatures know immediately when they're born. Another indication that God is out there and he is actually filling us with the knowledge that we need. One of the first instincts that human babies have is the sucking response. They need that when they latch onto their mother's breast to get milk. You don't have to teach a baby how to suck. A baby already knows that. It's a natural instinct. Just like birds already know exactly how to make their nests. Nobody has to teach them. Dad doesn't have to sit down with a blueprint and say, okay, son, here's where this twig goes and here's where this piece of mud goes. Birds already know it. It's an instinct, already pre-designed. The purpose of the nest is to protect the egg. So oftentimes you think maybe a nest is like a bird's home. Technically, it's not really a bird's home. Technically, the nest is there to protect the egg. That's its only purpose. A robin's nest can be made out of twigs and grass. You see a picture of one right there. A barn swallow's nest is often made out of mud. It often has little grass fibers or straw or hay to reinforce it. A killdeer's nest is made out of stones. You notice how well that's camouflaged. The eggs are perfectly camouflaged. There's 4 eggs right there, surrounded by a circle of kind of rocks, and the rocks just kind of protect it a little bit, and the rocks also then give it some camouflage. An oriole's nest hangs from a branch, and an osprey's nest is usually built near water, high up in the air, often on telephone poles or power lines. All right, incubation. Incubation is when eggs are kept warm by laying on them by the parents. Otherwise, the egg gets too cold, and then the chicken or the little baby chick dies inside the shell. So that's why the mom bird always has to sit on the egg, sits on the egg, and make sure that it's incubated. Incubation must happen continually or the egg will die. Feathers are not good heat conductors. Feathers are actually really good at insulating. So feathers are great for keeping the chicken's heat inside of its body, but it's got to transfer its heat from its body to the egg. So what happens is there's usually a small little patch on the bird's butt where the feathers kind of fall off. This is called a brood patch. So what happens is with the feathers gone, now the heat from the mama's skin can transfer directly to the egg. So because feathers are not good conductors, feathers are insulators, you have to lose the feathers so that you can have skin from the mom on the egg to heat the egg. In most species, the male and females take turn incubating the eggs. So that's not in all species, but in most. Many birds don't start incubating until a clutch has been formed. That's a group of eggs. First eggs are dormant until incubation starts. So what happens is the first eggs that are laid, if you have more than one egg, the first egg will just kind of be dormant until you start heating it up with incubation, and then that starts the process. Eggs are turned to eliminate cold spots, so they often will go in and they'll rotate the eggs so that the egg that was on the bottom of the pile now gets turned over, it's now on the top. For the emperor penguin keeps the eggs at 93 degrees for 8 to 9 weeks with air temperatures at 77 degrees below zero. Notice how the bird does it here. He actually puts the egg on his feet, so it never actually touches the ice or the snow. And he's got all that blubber, and he puts that blubber of his stomach right over top of the egg to keep it all nice and warm. Very, very incredible how they do that. Hatching. Hatching can take anywhere from 11 to 87 days, depending on the species. Birds are either 2 kinds. They're either altricial. Altricial means naked and helpless when born. Those are the birds that have their mouths open saying, feed me, take care of me, I can't do anything. Most songbirds are altricial. The opposite of altricial is a word called precocial. Precocial means that they're already covered with down and they're able to run or swim almost immediately. So precocial means they can feed themselves, they can follow mom, they're kind of all ready to go. Most water and ground birds are precocial. So like a duck, when a duck has ducklings, as soon as it hatches, the duckling can kind of get up, walk around, and follow mom. And when you lead him to food, the duckling can then kind of eat all by itself. The altricial birds, somebody actually has to bring food to them. So here's an example of a chicken hatching. A little chick coming out of the egg. There's a little crack. He develops. He comes out. There he is. Feeding. Precocial birds are taught to eat right away. Altricial birds have food brought to them by their parents. Some parents store food and regurgitate, that's a fancy word for throw it back up again, in the nest for the young, or the young will reach into the parrot's gullet. Sometimes the mom actually has the mouth open and the little baby bird puts his head all the way in the mama's mouth, reaches down the neck and grabs where the food is. Doves and pigeons, those are 2 birds that produce milk, just like mammals produce milk, but they produce it inside their throat in the crop. We'll talk a little bit more about that, about anatomy. So here you see these birds are altricial because they're saying, feed me, feed me. Mom has to take food from its mouth and put it into the babies. Another altricial bird, mama has to feed it. Flamingos about to receive crop milk. So again, milk from a place in the throat called the crop. These are also altricial. Let's talk about birds and the ecosystem. Birds are important members of the ecosystem. Some of the ways they can contribute to the ecosystem are as follows. They are pollinators. If they drink nectar, like a hummingbird, they pick up pollen and transfer it to other plants. Insect control. Many birds eat insects. They help control the insect population. Seed dispersal. They can help with agent dispersal. Remember all the way back to semester 1, we talked about different ways in which seeds get spread out. One of those was called agent dispersal. An agent or a animal takes the seeds and disperses them. When they eat fruits, they often dispose of the seeds in other places that will disperse plant species. So what happens is, like a bird will eat a fruit, swallow the seed, go fly off somewhere else, poop the seed out, and then the seed gets deposited somewhere else where the seed can then grow into a new plant. That's seed dispersal, agent dispersal. They maintain sustainable population levels. They eat some organisms, are eaten by others, and provide food for scavengers when they die. So they're all part of the web chain or circle of life. Let's talk just a little bit about anatomy and physiology. We're going to talk about feathers, and that'll be the end of our section for today. The purpose of feathers is they're a lightweight body covering. They're very good insulators. They keep the warm inside. And they provide a smooth, tapered, streamlined body and shape. This increases the surface area of the wing. That's necessary for flight. There's 3 kinds of feathers. The first kind of feather is called contour. They are strong, found on birds' bodies, wings, and tails. They always point toward the tail, and they aid in making the bird streamlined. Flight feathers, these are specially contoured feathers on the wings only. And then finally, the last one is down. Down is soft, fluffy feathers that provide excellent insulation, and they're not really very heavy. In fact, a lot of coats, winter coats, are sometimes made of down feathers or simulated factory-made feathers that simulate or are similar to what a bird's feathers would be like. That's called down feathers. They often find those in coats because they're very, very lightweight and they keep things very warm. Parts of a feather. You have something called the rachis, that's the stiff quill. You have the barbs, those are the veins of the feathers, and then on the barbs you have something called barbules. Those connect the barbs together. There'll be another picture here as well. Here's another picture of what it looks like. The anatomy of a feather. Here's a cross section, so there's the rachis. There's the barb, and there's the barbules. And on the very end of the barbules is also something called hooklets. Tiny, tiny little hooklets. That helps the feathers all stick together, and it aids in flight also. Incredible feather. By design, a feather can change shape during flight in response to different pressures in the air. Most of the feathers are designed to give lift. In other words, a feather has to be a certain shape that when the air comes over it, it takes more time for the air to go over than it does for it to go under. And when the air goes under quickly, what that does is that provides an upward force, or called lift. And that's what helps the bird gain flight. Lift. Some feathers are designed as ailerons and flaps to control direction and give extra lift. So in other words, kind of like rudders that help the steer. Tail feathers are used like the rudder and elevator to control flight direction. That's how they can go left, right, back and forth, bob and weave in and out. The feathers help give direction to where they're going. There are nerve endings at the end of each feather that turn the feather into sensory receptors. Just like we have senses at the end of our fingers that we can feel things, birds can feel things through the end of their feathers also. Since feathers are so important to birds, they spend a lot of time taking care of them. Preening is the process of straightening and rearranging feathers to keep them in good condition and help to preserve body heat. Preening. Sometimes we often use that term when a bird is preening its feathers, getting them all arranged and making sure every feather is in exactly the right spot. Sometimes that's a word that we will often use like if a woman is getting ready for going out at night. She sits in front of her makeup and she preens herself, making sure every hair is in place, making sure all the makeup is exactly where it needs to be. So it's a word that basically means taking extra care to make sure I'm presentable and everything is in order. Birds do that with their feathers. It's called preening. Most birds have oil glands near the tail. When oil is rubbed on the body, it can preserve the feathers and the skin and may help to make feathers waterproof in aquatic birds. When feathers get too old or worn out, the feathers will molt and they'll be replaced by new ones. Molting is the process of losing old feathers and gaining new ones. All right, we're going to stop here for today at flight patterns. This is where we'll pick it up on Monday. So make sure you have all these notes down. Watch it again if you need to, or go back and stop it as you see fit. And we will see you on Monday. Take care. God bless. Have a great day.